So let me ask you, do you know how often you should change the needle in your sewing machine? I'm getting ready to share with you a rule of thumb that I use every time to know when it's time to change the needle in my sewing machine. And this has really helped me to avoid nightmares when it's time to sew. Hi, everybody. So here we are in the middle of making a project. It's looking good, and all of a sudden the machine starts giving you tension problems, or it's just making a weird sound every time it's stitching. And before it was like running smooth, and now all of a sudden it's like making this weird sound. And you just keep going, and before you know it, the needle breaks. And you wonder, oh, maybe I should have changed the needle. But obviously you didn't. And don't worry, that happens to me all the time, or it used to happen more often before I realized that I could kind of determine when it was time to change the needle before catastrophe hit. So I learned this rule of thumb from a time when I was teaching how to sew at my local Joann store. So before they let you teach a sewing class, they want to make sure you know how to sew, of course, but they also give you a quick little training so that you do exactly what they want you to do and for like a special project, okay? And so when I was watching this training, the lady in the training said that you needed to change the needle every 6 to 8 hours of stitching. And I thought to myself, how in the world will you know that you've been stitching for 6 to 8 hours? Like, seriously, how? Like, do I have a timer in my sewing machine that every time I start stitching, I press it, and when I stop, I press it again? Like if I'm playing chess or something? No, I don't. Do you? I haven't seen that. And, how practical will that be anyway, right? So, okay, fine. That doesn't work. But how do they tell you 6 to 8 hours? Well, somebody may say, well, you change the needle every time you change a project. Okay, so let's say that I am making a small pouch and it only took me, I don't know, 15 minutes sewing. Because keep in mind, if it takes you 2 hours to make a bag, in those 2 hours, you are cutting the fabric, you're measuring, you are adding the interfacing, you are adding the double-sided tape, that the hardware. How long do you think you're really stitching? Not the 2 full hours, okay? So say you have a small project, a small pouch, or a small pillowcase, or something that you're making, a kitchen towel topper, whatever. It's not going to be 2 hours. It's not going to be 6 hours. And if you swap the needle every time you start a new project, before you know it, you're going to be paying a lot of money for needles. So that's not cost effective. However, if the project changes because the fabric changed, first you were making a top with knit fabric, and now you're making a pillow cover with home decor fabric. Yeah, the needle has to be swapped because you don't use the same needle for knit fabric than you would use for woven fabric. So yes, in that situation, you will have to change the needle anyway. But what if you're making a project that is several of the same thing? Or you technically don't change too much of your fabrics, like you always use the same type of material, then how do you know? How do you know when to change the needle? And here is how I know when to change the needle. This is my rule of thumb. I change my needle every third bobbin. Yes, so it's easier for me to keep track of how many times I'm swapping the bobbin compared to how often am I sewing. Like, did I stitch here for 5 minutes? Stop. Did I stitch for another 10 minutes? Stop. I mean, No. Okay. Right. Let's say I start my project. I'm winding the bobbin fully and I use it. Say I use it up and now I have to swap the bobbin. Okay, so now I know this is my second bobbin and I'm still using the same needle. But say I swap the colors of the fabric, same style fabric, just different color. And I have to change the bobbin to match that color. Okay, well, I look, okay, I didn't use up all of this and I'm using half of this. And I kind of keep a mental note. Okay, you can also have a sticky note and say, okay, well, I've used about 2, 3 bobbins by now. Believe me, you will start seeing your sewing machine not stitching as smoothly as it was before, like making a sound. And when it does that, stop what you're doing and change that needle. Because believe me, you think you're saving money, but you could end up damaging your machine, the tension on your machine, breaking the needle. There could be accidents that happened when a needle starts flying everywhere. So better safe than sorry. Don't change it too often where you go broke buying needles, sewing needles. But at the same time, change it when it's time because the expense could be higher, if you know what I mean. Consider liking this video and subscribing to this channel if you have learned something today. Here are a couple of tips that you can follow when changing the needle in your sewing machine. The first thing that I do is that I unplug the sewing machine. I turn it off and I unplug it because I don't want to have any problems with electricity as I'm working with a machine. Okay, the first thing, I don't want this going up and down and then catching in my fingers or whatever. Second, I put a piece of masking tape right there over the feeding dogs because when you start removing the foot and the needle may slide through your fingers. This is very thin and smooth, so it could slip and get inside the feeding dogs, and then you have to pull all this out, and it's just not fun to do. So those are the two things I definitely do. Then I get my little screwdriver that comes with the sewing machine. I remove the foot. Okay, put that one aside. And then here is the little screw for the needles. And I just pull it out, okay? And that's it. Put that one aside. I use these needles. These are definitely my go-to. These are 16/100 because I use a lot of faux leather and home decor fabric, so they're the thick ones. But I love this brand, Oregon Needles, and I get a pack of these, like all of these. Look, they come, I don't know how many I have in here, like 100. And I pay like $15 for all of these, and they're going to last me a while. So this is the last one of this packet. They come 5 in a little packet, and okay, super shiny. So you find the way that it goes into your machine. The flat side is here, and my machine takes them like that, with a flat side to the right, I think, or to the back. Sorry, to the back. Okay, then once you have it in there, if you have this one little tool that sometimes comes with a machine, sometimes it doesn't, and it just helps with pushing the thick amount of fabric under the presser foot. If you have this and it has that little hole in there, you can now insert it there, and then that will help it push the needle up, because you don't want the needle hanging, okay, going down, and then you screw it and it's not fully all the way up where it's supposed to be. So you use that to hold the needle, And then you can tighten it. Tighten the screw. Tighten the screw there. And now you can remove that and your needle is in place. And now we insert the presser foot again and simply tighten the screw. Remove the tape. And that's how you change your needle. Another thing I do all the time when I change my needle is I clean my sewing machine. You know, oil it, remove the lint, all of that. I have a video here where I show you how to clean the sewing machine. So go check that one out and I'll see you in that video. Ciao.